Cubase 7.5 also comes with a new update to HalionSonic SE. It's now called HalionSonic SE 2.0. And those of you that are familiar with HalionSonic SE have probably already noticed the crisp, new, darker appearance to the control panel. But the new features aren't just skin deep. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to create a new MIDI track, and I'm going to assign it to a new part on that HalionSonic SE instrument. So it's still going to be going to that first instance of HalionSonic SE, but I'm going to have it address part number 11. And then I'll call up the HalionSonic SE2 control panel, but before I do, I'm going to record enable my MIDI track, and I'm going to give it the name Trip, and you'll see why in just a moment. Now that particular track is assigned to the 11th slot of this instance of HalionSonic SE 2.0. So now I can go to the Load Program button, and it's going to reveal my browser, which I'm going to drag over here just a little bit. And you'll notice that there is a brand new library inside of this column. It's called HalionSonic SE Trip. Now, Trip is a brand new virtual analog arpeggiated synthesizer. So if I click on that library, then what I'm going to get in the search results are all of the sounds that correspond to the Trip analog synth. So let's click on a few of these presets so that you can hear what I'm talking about when I say an arpeggiated virtual analog synth. Let's go with this patch, which is Arps and Chords number 1. Now I'm just going to play middle C on my MIDI keyboard. And you can hear that I've got an arpeggiator in there with kind of a big fat analog synth sound. Let's try another patch. Now that's similar, but it has even more complex arpeggios in it. So let's spend a little bit of time with this preset. So I'm going to double click that preset. That's going to load it into that 11th slot, and then let's go to the edit page to reveal the Trip synthesizer. You can see that a lot of the controls, if you're familiar with analog instruments, are already right here on the control panel. Things like cutoff, resonance, the filter controls, and the amplifier envelope. But you can also really get into the 3 separate oscillators of Trip and choose which type of waveform you want to use for the oscillator, as well as the levels of each oscillator and the coarse and fine tune adjustments. But not only that, you also have a sub-oscillator. And since this is a virtual instrument, you're not going to be restricted by polyphony because you can have as many as 128 different notes coming out of this instance of Trip. So I'm going to set that back to the default of 16. You also have a modulation matrix that can add even more levels of complexity, but finally you have the arpeggiator page. You'll notice that each arpeggiator has 4 separate variations. Now, one way that you can control Trip is from the pads located at the bottom of HalionSonic SE2. So you'll notice the first 4 pads choose different arpeggio variations. So let's go with arpeggio number 1 and then click this A chord pad to listen to the result. Let's listen to the second variation. Third variation, and the fourth variation. But part of the reason why this particular preset sounds so complex is because it has multiple layers. Look up at the top here. You'll notice that this particular instrument is comprised of 2 separate layers. Right now we've just been looking at the first layer, but the second layer has all of its own settings as well. So if we were to mute this second layer, we could hear just the first layer. But then when we add the second layer in, it gets really cool. But let's say that we wanted a different patch to work with. So let's come down to the preset again, and I'm going to show you one of my favorites. This one is called Chirp Runner. So I'm going to double click on that, and then I'm going to play some chords using my MIDI keyboard, and you'll be able to hear this preset and all 3 of its layers. And before I move on, I also want to mention that they've added 8 new effects inside of HalionSonic SE2. So now when you go to the effects window and you choose different effects, look at the breadth of options that you have, including the tape saturator, envelope shaper, vintage ensemble, ring modulator, octaver, step flanger, auto filter, wah-wah, and an improved rotary effect. And don't forget that at the bottom of the list, you also have all of the legacy plugins that you had in previous versions of Halion Sonic SE. Now in the next tutorial, I'm going to take you through Groove Agent 4.